Culture Illiterate, a podcast with four friends over think comic book movies. I'm one of your hosts, Jake, and I spent $35 on a plastic popcorn bucket / backpack that looks like the Blue Beetle Scarab Kajida. With me are my friends and fellow co-hosts.
Wait, it's a backpack and a bucket?
Yeah, it's the audience won't be able to see this. We want to see it?
Yes.
Maybe I'll
Yes.
post a picture on Instagram, maybe?
Only the
Sean,
Patreon will
remember,
see it.
we saw it.
This.
Remember?
and it-
I know we saw it, but I can't
It
see how
opens
it's...
up and it has straps, and the straps are decorated too. And it's a backpack.
I assumed it was just a backpack, not like a popcorn thing.
Well, they advertise it as a popcorn vessel, but they just give you the popcorn separately. At least where I go. I think that's kind of what all of the everything that's like the ongoing trend right now at like theater chains is for like big like superhero movies and blockbusters that come out to have some kind of toy or collectible and have a hole in it so they can say it's a popcorn thing and make you overpay for under detailed plastic. This was the only one I've ever been interested in though, because like it actually feels like it has some degree of purpose and doesn't look awful.
You should wear it.
Like the Ant-Man head that just looked like a really, really, really low detail bust.
You should
I
wear
would
it
never
the next
wanna
time we go to the theater. Bring popcorn in it.
I think it'd be good for like wearing it to a convention if it's like a day where I'm not carrying that much stuff because it feels like festive and light. But sure, Sean.
Disgrace.
Well,
Anyway, the rest of y'all want to introduce yourselves?
yeah, I was just about to say, my name is Jason, and I think that enjoying the taste of ketchup is some sick shit.
Ketchup is good.
Ketchup is disgusting.
I disagree with that
I
statement.
tasted ketchup for the first time in my adult life, like a couple weeks ago, and my opinion on it hadn't changed since I was a child. It is still fucking disgusting.
You know what? Your food opinions don't really matter, Jason. I'm just gonna let you know.
First of all, no one's food opinions matter because they're opinions.
No.
On food.
Exactly. But your
Mine do,
opinions
Matt's do,
matter the
Sean's
least
do.
out of everyone.
Anyway, ketchup tastes like fucking rotten tomato dog shit, and I really wanted to vomit, but I had to taste it because it was for a bit.
Really?
Yes, it was for a bit, and I have to commit to the bit. Otherwise, who am I?
I don't know. Who are you?
Jason.
Cool.
On to you, Matt.
Yeah, so you know who hasn't?
Cool. My name is Matt. Hi. My fun fact is that Brendan... Is it Ralph? Is it... How do you pronounce his last
Who
name?
played Superman in this
Rolf?
movie? Brandon Routh?
Brendan Ralph, yeah.
Brendan, oh.
He played Todd Ingram in the Scott versus the World movie, which I really like.
Scott
Yes, he
Pilgrim?
sure did.
Scott Pilgrim.
Scott-
Yes, he
Scott
was
versus the
he was
world.
the guy who got held at gunpoint by the vegan police.
Yes, that's right. I forgot about that part. I just remembered him in it. God, I love that fucking movie.
I know.
Oh, I
It's
can't
so
wait for
goddamn
the...
good.
The anime.
Good comic.
Yeah, I can't wait for it. It looks so good.
Oh fuck, that movie's so good. I should read the source material because fuck that
The-
movie's good.
It's
You
very
should.
good.
I gotta buy it. I don't own a copy. I borrowed it from a friend of mine from high school. But I don't own it.
I have all the color versions if you want to borrow them. They're very pretty. But anyways, I guess I'll introduce myself because my name is Sean, and I'm gonna go against Jason's thing a little bit, but not in the way you think. I could totally eat an entire jar of mayonnaise on my own. It tastes so good.
That's some sick
I
shit
like
too.
mayo, but that's extreme.
Mayo
Mayo.
is like one of the most disgusting things to me. Like that, it's probably over ketchup. Personally,
It's so tasty. I don't like. I could lather that shit on any like piece of bread I'm eating.
Okay,
I love it.
Counterpoint. It smells like dick cheese.
Counterpoint. It smells like dick cheese.
Fair.
Me and Priya have been cooking a lot of dinners on this website with like Priya found it and it has a lot of like not too unhealthy recipes, and they're all pretty good so far. But they're like obsessed with mayo. Every time there's like a sauce or vinegar, like any kind of liquid based thing that goes into or onto the dish, they always call for mayo in it. To the point of like we made these really good enchiladas this past week, and they wanted us to make this. They wanted us to just put mayo on them. Mayo on enchiladas, and it was so stupid because the dish already called for like plain yogurt, which tastes exactly like sour cream and is like the same. Plain yogurt and sour cream are like pretty indistinguishable, to be honest. So we were like, why would we do that when we could just drizzle, like, if we're going for like mayo is not any healthier than sour cream and tastes significantly different and does not fit with the flavors. So we were baffled and did not do that. But yeah, it's just weird. They call for like a ton of mayo and everything, and it's so strange because other than that, it's like health focused.
You want to know something that I always hated mayo, but something that made me hate it even more is being someone who does dishes at my place of employment every day, and some of those dishes being tubs of mayo and just warm, wet mayo that's been sitting in a dish sink is just one of the foulest things to walk into.
Slurp that shit up.
No,
Yeah,
it's all
defense,
crusty and
all
dried to the
condiments are nasty in
side.
that scenario.
That's
Dude,
even
just
tastier.
Will Levis
so
that shit, man.
gross.
Just Will Levis that shit.
No, no. And I got a few buddies that fucking love mayo, and it baffles me, dude.
Here's the thing about mayonnaise is that it is one of the best condiments out there, not really because it's good by itself, but because it's a fantastic base for so many other sauces.
Yeah, let me say, like, I will qualify it with the fact that there are plenty of mayo-based sauces that I like. I will acknowledge that, Chipotle mayo is good, aiolis can be good, and so on, but it's like, but mayo in and of itself is disgusting to me.
Do
You
know
mean
what's-
fantastic?
You know what's actually the best part about mayo is that using it and like smothering like a piece of bread with it and then frying it.
Oh yeah, it
Because
burns really well. It fries really
It
well.
burns really,
yes.
really well.
Yeah, you do that for grilled cheese.
Yeah.
That's the key, because
And the
it burns
best
better
part
than
is
butter.
It doesn't exactly, and it doesn't taste like mayo when you're done.
Yeah, it just tastes like bread.
Are we a food podcast now?
I don't know. We've
Yes.
been talking about
We might as
mayo
well
for
be.
a really long time.
Although to be honest, if we do become a food-based podcast, it will just be me and Jake talking for most of the time. If I'm being
And then-
totally honest.
And then it would just be me saying what I don't like, which is like most of the things.
Like Sean's got a pretty
no,
good
I'm not.
palate.
I'm
Let's
not. I'm not
do-
saying because Sean doesn't have opinions of it. It's just me and you are very opinionated on food, and so we'll
I
just
mean,
talk
you
over
know
everyone
a lot
else.
more than I do.
I'm
A lot.
opinionated on certain foods, but like I also don't give a fuck because I'm very picky. So like I don't give a shit.
He's very opinionated on food he doesn't like.
Well, no. Listen, I just don't like a lot of foods, and I acknowledge that that's the thing is, I don't care that people like the foods that I don't like, so I don't get why people care that I don't like them. And that pisses me off.
Jason's defense, I have never really experienced, at least not since Jason got to high school maybe. Jason, while being a picky eater, does not prevent you. Like, if Jason's part of a group and they want to go somewhere to eat, he'll deal.
Oh yeah,
So it's not one of those situations where it's like, okay, well, it's a pain in my ass because now I can't get food that I want. I personally have never experienced that issue, so I'm cool with the Jason's
flow,
palate
brother.
confuses me, but it doesn't impact my life negatively, so I don't care.
That's what I'm saying. If I just want to eat chicken fingers, let me do that. If I don't like fucking ketchup, then let me live.
Never.
It's just funny that you're talking about ketchup like it's some
Oh my
craze.
God.
You're like, if I don't like chicken liver, something.
No,
called
I
ketchup
know,
is so
but
base
that's
for
what
so many
makes it
people.
even stranger to me is that it's so common because I cannot fathom enjoying getting that flavor on your tongue and being like, that's good. I like that.
Wait,
It's
which
good.
flavor?
I like
What
ketchup.
flavor?
The flavor of ketchup.
If you like vinegar-based sauces, then you can. It's definitely more of your thing. The thing about it is that it's so overpowering that even though I do like ketchup, I only have it on certain types of food, like fries, right? But I don't really put that ketchup by itself on a burger because then you just taste the ketchup.
This isn't necessarily a rec, but I felt like it was worth mentioning because it's something we talked about briefly before in our Blade Trinity episode. But I actually went and watched the entire one and only season of Blade the series.
With sticky
And
fingers?
how did that go for you?
Starring
How did that
Sticky
go for
Fingers?
you?
Who's actually probably the best part of it, because really all that's required to be Blade and be that version of Blade, which he's like playing the Snipes version technically, or a very similar one, is to like look cool and like you don't like anybody, and he was great at that. So he was actually pretty solid as Blade, but yeah, I can't say I'd recommend it. It's like 13 episodes and it's pretty fucking, 2005 Spike TV, which is exactly what it was. But I just felt like I should provide that update since we mentioned the series and got a bit of a laugh out of it existing a handful of episodes ago. So yeah, I actually went and I watched all of Blade the series starring Sticky Fingers.
Good for you. I have a rec that's actually a rec and not just a thing that I did.
It's not just a weird life update.
Yeah. A band called Movements, who I've been a fan of for a very long time, released their third full-length album recently. It's titled Ruckus. I think it's a phenomenal album. I think it's, of their 3 albums, it's not the worst one. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, I just don't know of the 2 that I would put at the top which one's the best. But they're very good, and this is a very good album. If you like emo, pop-punk kind of shit, fantastic album, fantastic music in general. I've met them several times, as I've seen them like 8 times, 7 or 8 times, I don't fucking know at this point. And they are very kind people, very friendly, so I recommend them. Very good band, very, very, very good. Just good tunes.
I also have a rec, and this one kind of has to do with this movie, but I recommend Young Justice. I've started rewatching it again to go through it, and it's about as fun as I remember it being. And I haven't watched the latest season yet, but I remember watching, so I haven't watched Phantoms yet, but I remember watching The Outsiders part of it, and that was good. And I'm having a blast going through it again, so I recommend it.
I should do that. I haven't watched that show in a long time.
It brings me back to old Saturday morning cartoons. It feels nice.
This episode we're covering Superman Returns, which I guess you kind of already got the temperature of the room earlier if you're listening on how we feel about it, but it released June 28th, 2006, written by Michael Dougherty and Dan Harris, with a story and direction by the same scumbag who previously directed X-Men and X2, X-Men United. Cinematography is by Newton Thomas Siegel, with music by John Ottman, which includes plenty of inspiration in the use of John Williams' original Superman score from 1978, because if anyone was not aware, the movie is intended as a continuation of the Christopher Reeve Superman movies from the 70s and 80s, but it stars obviously not Christopher Reeve, since it came out in 2006, Brandon Routh as Clark Kent / Superman, Kate Bosworth as Lois Lane, someone more vile than Lex Luthor as Lex Luthor, James Marsden as Richard White, nephew of Perry White, Parker Posey as Kitty Kowalski, Frank Lignella as Perry White, Sam Huntington as Jimmy Olsen, Eva Marie Saint as Martha Kent, Tristan Lake LeBeau as Jason, Lois Lane's son, and Marlon Brando returning as Jor-El via archival footage. So then real quick before we jump into it, again, given that the survivors of the people were predominantly young, underaged men, we're going to once again encourage you to donate to malesurvivor.org, which we've referenced before, or RAIN, RAINN.org, which are both organizations dedicated to helping survivors of sexual assault, the former being committed to preventing, healing, and eliminating forms of sexual violence against boys and men, to treatment, research, education, advocacy, and activism, the latter being the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. They have an app and a national sexual assault hotline, 800-656-HOPE, as well as a chat now feature on their website. So, spend time on those sites instead of looking at the IMDb's of the people we didn't want to mention. And anyway, let's get into it. Had any of you seen Superman Returns before this?
I had not. I remember you and Dad telling me about it, because I remember Jake and I watching, what's that show called that Brandon Routh was in, and he played Ray Palmer.
Oh, various CW shows.
Yeah, we, watched various points of those shows, and he was in it, and then I remember you telling me about him playing Superman, and Dad being like, yeah, that movie kind of sucked, and I was like, oh, I shouldn't watch it then. So I never did until now, and it kind of sucked. Yeah, that's all I got for you, but Ray Palmer is a good-looking dude. Handsome guy.
I'll go. I mean, I had never seen this movie at all. It it's like one of the ones that like it came out and I had not heard anybody talk about it afterwards since. To me, it's been like a weirdly forgotten movie from a bygone era. I mean, it also doesn't help that this movie didn't make that much to begin with, but like, yeah, it's never one that's, I knew it existed, it just never crossed my mind, and nobody ever gave it like super duper high praise, so I just never got around to it.
I have seen this movie before, and it is a very rare occasion in which my impressions of a movie from a movie I watched when I was in elementary school still reflects my opinion of it today. As for what that opinion is, we'll get to that later.
A nice teaser, huh? And were you all aware of the fact that it was supposed to be in continuity with the Christopher Reeve Superman films going into this?
I did know that, actually.
Yeah, I knew that.
I don't know why I knew that, but I did know it.
Right. I mean,
for
you
some
can
reason.
kind of put it together as you watch it, even though obviously, like, setting-wise, this one is set pretty contemporary. It feels like 2006 in the movie, and those movies are all set when they were made in the 70s and 80s, but with the Jor-El footage and all that, you can, kind of put it together. So the movie takes place after Superman's been missing for 5 years. He traveled to the location where astronomers believe they had discovered remains of Krypton, and in the meantime, Lex Luthor, his nemesis, has been recently released from prison and married a rich widow to obtain a fortune upon her death. Having failed to find any survivors of the Kryptonians, Superman returns to Earth and resumes his job at the Daily Planet as Clark Kent in Metropolis. There, he learns that the woman he loves, Lois Lane, is now engaged to Perry White's nephew Richard, with whom she has a 5-year-old son named Jason. She has won the Pulitzer Prize for her article "Why the World Doesn't Need Superman." Luthor travels to the Fortress of Solitude and steals Kryptonian crystals, which he uses for an experiment that causes a power outage across the East Coast. The power loss interferes with the flight test of a space shuttle that is set to be launched into space by piggybacking on an airliner occupied by Lois Lane, who's covering the story. Clark flies back into action as Superman and stops the plane from crashing onto a baseball stadium. So the movie starts with a time jump, and you're picking up after Superman's return. You see him crash land in Kansas again, a la his original appearance in front of his mother. And how do you guys feel, like, before we even get into specifics, but how do you feel about the fact that this is a Legasequel, kind of before those were popular, as well as the decision to have it pick up with this 5-year time jump, but also pick up for them to not really address the fact that those movies previously were clearly set in the late 70s to mid 80s, whereas this one is definitely not set as like a period piece. It looks like it's 2006.
Yeah.
I can say something real quick.
Go ahead.
That thing being, I am a person who doesn't really drink soda, but this is what someone who drinks soda, right? So what I'm trying to get at is this must be what it feels like for someone to drink like regular Coca-Cola, to just take a sip and realize it's diet Coca-Cola and just be severely disappointed. That's what this movie is. It's like you sip it and then it's like kind of the same, but like, it just doesn't hit right. And then you read the label and just go like, oh.
Yeah, or like you think you're taking a sip of water and then it's Sprite and you're like, oh shit, like Sprite's fine, but
exactly.
Like, I just wasn't expecting it.
Exactly. Instead of Coca-Cola, it's just shitty diet Coca-Cola. And then like Diet Coca-Cola, if you read, the ingredients, and in this case you read the credits, you realize there's a bunch of shit in it that's worse than the original.
There's a whole bunch of shit missing that made the first one good.
Yeah. The director, his initial, I'm going to call him BS, but in my mindset,
because he's a bunch of bullshit.
Bullshit. So bullshit directed this movie. And it is horrible. Bullshit. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, so I basically echo a lot of the same feelings that Matt said, but I wasn't intending on using soda as a comparison, though I did love that analogy. I liked it in concept of like I think it's a compelling story to be like, yeah, Superman left for a while, he's coming back, and he's, things are different, he's adjusting, and it's Lois has moved on, whatever, yada yada yada. Like, it's a good concept, but it's Diet Coke. It's not. The execution doesn't come through as much. It's like you said, it's supposed to be set 5 years after the originals, which were in like the 70s and 80s, and this is like, that doesn't seem like it's in the mid 80s or late 80s. It seems like it's in 2006, like Jake said. Like it just, all of the aspects of it that seemed compelling just weren't actually there in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
like
yeah,
the charm, the vibe, the everything.
Well, yeah, that too. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's missing a lot. It just doesn't. It's like, how people make those comments of why we see like random face, like you see a face that doesn't exactly look human, but it's really close and it reaches that uncanny valley feeling. That's kind of like, it's really trying to be something it's not, and it's like putting a mask over itself to hide the fact that it is what it is, and it's just like, it just doesn't come across right. Like, it definitely, like, you can tell that it's like continuing the previous movies, but it just gets so awkward when you notice like people have cell phones, and then you have like weird things where it's just like, it just doesn't, things aren't sitting well. And while I do think that like the story in itself, the concept from the start is kind of like a bit compelling, it also just feels like another excuse to make it a weird fish out of water story, which is what Superman is. But I feel like, considering this, if we're gonna be continuing the what is essentially Christopher Reeve's Superman in this, it just feels like we're treading similar ground, but in a way that makes it not seem like it's treading similar ground.
Matt and Sean kind of had analogies that sum up exactly how I feel, but I think it's like, even beyond just like this, like the cell phone example, like, and beyond like the setting things, though I do think it would have been interesting if they had like set this movie in like 1990 or something, and maybe could have even given us like 90s mullet Superman. But the fact that, to me, one of the big examples is Lex conning the old woman out of her, or I guess conning her family out of the inheritance when she dies. It feels like something that I could buy Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor doing, but this version and this portrayal, while simultaneously is actually one of the only things that feels sort of on par with the original, I don't necessarily, it doesn't work here, and it doesn't feel like it fits with the whole thing of the movie. So when like Sean talks about that uncanny valley effect of feeling like you're like kind of watching those, Reeve, Donner, Lester movies, kind of not. That's such an example, because that feels like something that would happen there, but it doesn't really work here. And it's also a missed opportunity. You could have just had him, be getting off free and still rich, to show that, rich people don't really pay for what they do often. But that's, to me, like the big example of it not really lining up with it being a Legasequel, and why I feel like that was kind of a bad decision.
Yeah, I mean, like, the one thing with Lex is that, like, it doesn't feel like it wouldn't fit in the older movies, but, like, the tone of this movie just doesn't seem to fit it, is the best way I can put it. I don't know. The tone of this movie doesn't seem as hopeful and quirky and funny as, like, and hopeful as the original movies were, and because of that, it kind of hurts the portrayal of Lex in the same way that Gene Hackman had done it. It feels strange, and it just feels out of place at times. Like, it still is, like, I think, like, close enough to a decent portrayal of that Lex, but, like, it's just, I don't know, it like I said, it feels so uncanny. I don't feel like I'm looking at what I should be looking at.
Yeah, it just, I don't know, it's almost like watching like a stage play of the original Superman. Like, it's like watching people who aren't the people you watched do it before pretending to be those people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that they're not playing, a version of the character that caters to the actor's strength. It's more trying to replicate the original Superman trilogy, and it honestly does it a disservice, because it's impossible to replicate what was so good in the original trilogy, that you honestly should have just, hired these actors to play their version of the characters, rather than forcing them to play characters of of a previous iteration. It just does a disservice. Like, why?
It's not fair to any of the cast, really.
No.
I think Kate Bosworth kind of makes out the worst because, like, Margot Kidder's Lois Lane was someone that it felt like she was gonna, like, jump on any mistake you made. She was gonna give you so much shit that you had to be, like, on your game around her if you were someone that she was interviewing or interrogating, or if you were just Clark. And she just had so much energy, and Kate Bosworth's just kind of like here.
She's fine. She's fine.
Oh god, that was the biggest change that I saw that really just dropped the ball. It did not feel like I was watching Lois Lane.
Yeah, because especially with it being a follow-up to Margot Kidder's performance, which was so good, and like she had like a good character to her, and then they didn't really give Lois that in this as much. It was like she was a very kind of plain, basic character, I felt. And it was, when you're naturally comparing that to the Margot Kidder performance that's so electric and so expressive, it's like it just falls empty.
With that, how do you guys feel about like the overall look at what this world looks like after Superman's disappearance? Because again, like Lex becoming a free man and rich again and all that makes sense to me. But other than that, it just feels like it's like Lois writes this, why the world doesn't mean Superman thing, which makes her seem kind of, but it doesn't feel like she's actually like bitter about it. Whereas again, it feels like Margot Kidder's Lois Lane would have been like jumping down his throat about like, why did you leave Earth as its main protector for 5 years and not tell anyone? And it just feels like there wasn't. It feels unimpacted by the fact that Superman left and came back, and ultimately there's that. I feel like part of the movie wants to show the fact that why the world does need Superman, but I don't think it ever effectively shows that, and it shows in just like the way the Daily Planet and Lois and all those people just kind of keep on functioning with normal life.
I just thought it was kind of uncharacteristic for Superman to just disappear for 5 years, because he already knew that his planet was destroyed, and yet when they say they finally found it, he still goes to look at it. What was he trying to find? More space? Because all the rubble is gone at that point. Like, there's nothing of Krypton left. Maybe he'll find a few souvenirs here and there, but there's just no point to, looking for his home planet. Because I always felt like Superman, even though he is Kryptonian and he is alien, still very much considers Earth his home. Like, he doesn't consider himself an alien. He thinks just himself as human. Like, he's from Kansas. Like, he's Clark Kent.
Yeah.
It's the fact that he'll just voluntarily, like, disappear for 5 years and leave the Earth unprotected just seems kind of weird. It did not sit right with me. Especially when they tried to convince me that this is the same character portrayed by Christopher Reeves.
Yeah, and
that's not believable to me. That's not believable.
And I agree with you, Matt.
I think that kind of helped me like collect exactly my thoughts on it. Like, I think it goes back to like how some of the concept in this is compelling and sounds like a decent story, but then the execution isn't good. Like, the idea of Superman being gone and a world without Superman is like a fascinating idea, to see what that looks like and then see him coming back to it, and like, how it's changed would be interesting, but they didn't do it in a way that like seemed in character for the Reeves Superman. Like Matt said, like, it just doesn't fit that character at all. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense, really.
That's the price you pay of having big character moments and big developments happen off screen, because I can buy, like, I don't need my Superman, I don't need any of my heroes to be perfect, and I can buy that he is desperate upon hearing that there's a chance of survivors of remnants to like find something. Even it's a little out of character, but like maybe for the Reeves version, but who seems pretty at home at Earth, but I can buy it. That said, but when you don't show it, when you just like, when the movie picks up with him returning to Earth and he never really and you never see the emotional impact it has on him having to leave his home and his family, and why did he make the decision to not tell anybody before leaving and not have any kind of closure or plan in place? Like, did he leave thinking Earth was in good hands, like things were well enough? Did he? And then again, when he comes back, you don't really necessarily see any reason why him being gone necessarily mattered on a grander scale than maybe like his mom being sad. And I just, it's everything important happens off screen, and I don't really get the point of doing that when there's a lot of things that happen on screen that you definitely could have cut out.
Yeah, it's a big show don't tell kind of thing that they just do, and I feel like if they cut out a lot of the boring parts in this movie that serve nothing at all and maybe added that as like the introduction to the movie, a lot of it would have hit a lot harder. At the very least, like some sort of like, I don't know, this is the dumbest thing in the world, but like a montage of showing us the 5 years that like from him deciding I'm gonna go to him getting there and then seeing it and then coming back. Like, he's out there alone. Can you imagine the road trip back? That's agonizingly depressing.
True.
Yeah.
A little will go a long way.
And yeah, I don't know. It's like Jake said, he doesn't have to be perfect and all that, but like if you're gonna have him do such a dramatic thing like that, show it to me. Make me believe it. If it's gonna be believable, show it to me so that I can believe it. You know what I mean? Like, show me what happened. Show me what led to that. Don't just feel exactly like, he was there because he was, I guess, and now he's back.
Well, they try to push the reason that he basically wanted to fight other Kryptonians.
But again, it's like, it doesn't, the urgency, the emotional urgency for him to do that doesn't make sense when you don't at least like show some kind of scene to like build it and, you know, display that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the thing is that this is supposed to be a continuation of the Christopher Reeve Superman. The Christopher Reeve Superman had a lot to live for in Earth, right? And so it would be very confusing to just all of a sudden just go on a 5-year trip without telling anyone, right? Because it's not like Clark Kent is a total loner in those movies. He has relationships with people, and it's not like they're fake relationships, they're actual relationships. And so the fact that he'll just disappear for that long, it just doesn't make any kind of sense whatsoever. And also, like, I don't know, like, they try to push the reason as to why he left is that, I don't know, he was lonely. Like, he wants to fight other Kryptonians. It just goes back to what I said before. Like, his planet was destroyed. The message left by his father basically says, you are the last Kryptonian. Why did he still look for them?
I mean, yeah, but Superman lore, that happens, and there's also, like, a shit ton of Kryptonians that end up being alive. He already fought Superman. Superman already fought Zod and other ones in Superman 2. And this movie kind of ignores Supergirl. But I just mean, like, I don't necessarily have a beef with that as the setup, because I think if you're desperate for even a little bit of a world you never knew, the chance that somebody could have, like, and there is, like I said, like, comic lore basis for chunks surviving, such as Kandor City and Supergirl and et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I don't really have any problem with that as much as the fact that I just don't feel any of that emotion of that hope existing and then getting torn away from him out of nowhere. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he had to, like, relive something so painful. I know he didn't live through the destruction, but, like, the learning of it the first time. So I'm not sure. I mean, I would have started the movie with, I actually, like, on a positive note, really like the plane rescue. I think Superman returning by stopping a plane from falling with Lois Lane on it is just very quintessential Superman. And I think the movie would have been a lot better if you shaved off that first, like, half fucking hour and just had it start with that really thrilling plane rescue. And kind of quickly seen the movie's like really muted in a lot of ways in its color and visuals, and it would have been kind of cool if you had him maybe save the plane and then post that the world livens up more. But that's just another way where it doesn't feel like the movies it's supposed to be following up, and in the end I just feel like there's like a wasted half hour at the start of this 2.5 hour 40-minute movie when you could have just jumped in with his return rather than like a bunch of mulling that doesn't really have any kind of emotional impact.
Yeah, that's the thing though, is that this is supposed to be, okay, I'm going to be saying this all night, that this is supposed to be a continuation of Christopher Reeve Superman. And it goes back to my Diet Coke analogy earlier. Why is this movie so absent of color? I don't understand that. The original trilogy was so colorful. Even movies 3 and 4, which this movie totally ignored, by the way, are more colorful than this movie. Like Superman's S isn't even a bright red. It looks more like poop green at times because of how muted this color is. Like, nothing pops out. And so it just makes it inherently more boring than any other Superman costume that I've seen. Like, at least, like, the Zack Snyder Superman costume was, like, kind of bad, and so it was more memorable in that light. But this one, it's just boring, right? It's forgettable. So it's just a waste of memory space. and so you might as well remove it from your memory banks as soon as you see it, because there's nothing worth remembering it for, because it's just a poor imitation of the original one.
And that's why I never heard anybody talk about this movie after it came out.
Oh, and
It's one of those things I realized after watching it. I was like, now I understand why nobody talks about this.
well, here's the thing, Sean, is that even as a small child, when I saw this movie, I just thought this movie's boring. And when you get older, your tastes change, a lot of things change about you, right? All these years later, rewatching this movie, my opinion of this movie has not changed. Is the exact same. It's just boring. It's saturated of color. It's honestly really poorly paced. There's a lot of scenes that didn't need to be there. The only difference now is that I can put my feelings into actual words instead of just saying it's boring. That's really the only difference between now and like 15 years ago.
Isn't it crazy, like, when you're young and, like, your first experiences with, like, movies being bad? You know what I mean? Like,
I was more surprised that I identified the movie as being bad, because I did not think I had tastes back when I was in elementary school.
that's what I'm saying, is, like, I'll never forget, like, the first time, like, I remember, like, Prince of Persia was the first time I saw a movie and was like, oh, movies are bad sometimes. And that was one. I'll never forget that. That was the first time I was just like, didn't like a fucking movie.
Yeah, isn't that movie with
Jake Gyllenhaal? Yes, it was a Disney movie.
I watched that movie.
It's dog shit.
I remember it being kind of bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
But the thing is that I don't remember anything about it, and so I can't verify through my memory if it was good or not.
Well, I believe I was in second grade when it came out, if I'm not mistaken, and I was just like, what a horseshit fucking movie. Anyway,
Okay, if I bulldoze through a couple paragraphs of plot.
please do.
No.
Okay, well, fuck you, Sean. The world rejoices at Superman's return, even if Sean doesn't, though he has difficulty coping with the fact that those he once held close have all moved on from him. When Superman gets distracted by an out-of-control vehicle, a diversion involving Luthor's henchman, Kitty Kowalski, Luthor steals kryptonite from the Metropolis Museum of Natural History. Perry assigns Lois to interview Superman against her contentions to not, largely because this movie seems like obsessed with the fact that she has a rumored past sexual relationship with Superman, something to her now fiance and presumed baby daddy's displeasure. So he assigns her to interview Superman while Clark investigates the blackout, which she wanted to do. Lois and Jason inadvertently board Luthor's yacht and are captured after Lois decides to hold interest in the blackout story. So which she connects to Luthor's experiment. He reveals to them his plan to use one of the stolen Kryptonian crystals, which he has combined with kryptonite to grow a new landmass in the northern Atlantic Ocean, which will then supplant the continental United States, killing millions of people. Seeing Jason seemingly have a slight reaction to the kryptonite, Luthor asks Lois who Jason's real father is, and Lois asserts that the father is Richard. The crystal begins to create Luthor's landmass, while Lois attempts to escape, but is attacked by henchmen. However, she's saved by Jason, who throws a piano at the man and kills him, thus confirming that Superman is his real father. Meanwhile, Superman attempts to minimize the destruction of Metropolis caused by the new landmass's growth, and Richard pilots a seaplane to rescue Lois and Jason. Superman arrives to help and flies off to find Luthor. So, with this, how do you guys feel about Lex's plan? Because I do think it is kind of gold that he is still obsessed with real estate and property ownership as he was in the original Superman the movie. I think that is a nice touch, and it's a plan that kind of works for me in this like outlandish comic booky way. Plus, it gets us to focus on some genuinely, I think, good action pieces of Superman just saving people, which I think is where that kind of action with that character really shines, as opposed to him fighting. It's because in the end he is about hope and about saving and protecting others, not just punching.
That plan was honestly the one thing that I was like, okay, this one hits well, because just them keeping with his whole plan is just land development. I love it. It's so stupid, and I love it.
I'm on the same boat. I really enjoy the plan because of how silly it is and how comic booky it is. It just makes me miss Gene Hackman though, because I know that he will do a really good job just like selling the cheese of the movie and making it more fun. And what we got is just kind of basic.
Yeah, it was a really good, like, I liked the plan, like, as we all did, but, like, Matt said, everything else about the movie just kind of made it feel like it fell flat. Because, I don't know, when Gene Hackman was doing it, it was like, I don't know, the movies were colorful and fun to look at and watch and exciting. And then in this one, it was just like, oh, just kind of felt lame in execution.
Yeah, I think it is there's some moments here and there. Like I really like the shot of the bullet hitting Superman's eye during the distraction scene, and the recreation of Action Comics #1 with him catching the car. But it's too little in a movie that's really dragged out. I also think this is our only maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe you guys think I'm being too harsh, but I think this is the only bad Lois Lane we've had. Not just so far, but even looking forward. I think, like, I'm obviously Margot Kidder, amazing. I'm blanking on who played her in Superman and the Mole Men, but I thought she was good too. And
Oh yeah, she was
from
awesome. She was
Lois
awesome.
Lane's from animation as well, like the Bruce Timm series, like the one in My Adventures with Superman, the Ruben Fleischer one, and then TV Lois Lane's like Erica Durant or Bitsy Tulloch, and I'm sure there's a bunch that I'm leaving out as well, have all been great. And unfortunately,
Really?
Kate Bosworth, like no shade at her, I think has absolutely nothing to do in this movie other than be Jason's mom, who I think the Superman Sons thing is like a perfectly fine plot line, but they just make Lois like wet paper to the point of like they even write in a line about how she can't write about sex worth a damn, which feels so not Lois Lane, especially so not Margot Kidder version Lois Lane, which this is a continuation of again. And it's just another way where this movie seems to like miss its point in a way that I do think like I don't necessarily think it was fair of Ralph to make him have to be picking up for Reeve, but I think he does a solid job. And I generally I like Lex's plan here. I like the evil music over Lex's wig, but Lois is so left behind in this in terms of giving things to do. It's kind of got like I love the Raimi trilogy and I love Kirsten Dunst, but kind of like how it's worse than they do MJ, and I'm on record as not liking how those movies do MJ, but this is even worse.
Yeah, that's fair.
That is very fair. Although I don't really remember anything positive about Amy Adams' Lois Lane.
I mean, it's better. She does stuff though. I'm not
really.
crazy,
I just remember
but
her just staring at stuff, and that's really it. I don't really remember her like particularly doing anything.
Solitude. Like I'm not a huge defender of those movies, but she does discover the Fortress of Solitude. She does save Superman from getting killed. She does help in his resurrection. She I don't think it's like the best Lois, but compared to this version, that just kind of like the only decent like Lois investigating Luthor's boat and then the interaction between them is the only time that I feel like Kate Bosworth actually gets to act in this movie, and she's really good actually I think in that scene, but for the most part she's just kind of really one note.
Yeah, I mean like I kind of am with I agree with Matt a little bit that like I don't know, I can't remember much of what Amy Adams did, and while she did do stuff and I don't think she's the worst, my god, I feel like Kate Bosworth this Amy this Lois Lane was just not it. It was just not it. It like yeah, the only real time where it felt like I was watching Lois was her like wanting to investigate the boat, and like I get not much else past that. Like you said, it just feels like a regression for her character because she's just a mom in this, and that's fine. But like,
it just
she can be a mom, and she could do more.
She can also like have fucking character traits and like impact on the story, you know, and still be a mom, you know, like all of those things can still be true.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that people don't realize. Good. Yeah, people don't realize that being a mom is not a personality.
Look, it's not inherently bad. Like I don't mind this Jason storyline necessarily. I don't like the execution of it. And while it's a drastically different storyline, they have Lois Lane as a mother of two teenage boys in Superman and Lois, which is an excellent television show. And that's wonderful. And they use the fact that she is a mother and how that impacts her as a person and impacts who she is wonderfully. But this movie, it just defines her as nothing but being there to be in this really, really lame, really, really damp and limp love triangle. Because this movie also wastes James Marsden, and it also underutilizes Brandon Routh, who is a good Superman. And you know who's written this side? This is a complete aside, but why is Cal Penn in this movie?
Oh yeah, I meant to bring that up. That was so fucking funny. I laughed so hard the second I saw Cal Penn's face.
One of Luthor's henchmen, but I think he has one line, but that also he's in like a lot of Luthor scenes, but he's just standing there, but then that camera camera will also linger on just him for several seconds at a time, and I'm not sure what happened, but it was like they decided to cut his character out of the movie, but he was contractually obligated to be in it for a certain amount of time. For some reason in the edit, they were just like, let's stare at Kal Penn for 5 seconds at a time, but not even give him a line, or so he's just standing there smiling. It's that he's just standing there menacingly. But
in my brain,
because it's fucking Kal Penn being a nerd named Stanford.
In my brain, the casting director was just fucking dead set on getting Kal Penn for that.
We don't have a role, but we need Kal Penn.
They were like, who should we cast for this random scientist? I don't know, anyone off the street? No, we need Kumar.
He's just a big Harold and Kumar stan. He's like, just stand next to me when you're not in a shot and make Kumar jokes, and just
be here for vibes, man.
The only thing quieter than his character in this movie is the dialogue overall, because I don't know if you guys experienced that, but the fucking dialogue in this movie was mad quiet. Something was up with the sound.
Yeah, what?
Nothing else was, just that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so, God, where were we? Upon confronting Luthor, Superman's weakened by the landmass as it's filled with kryptonite. This allows Luthor and his henchmen to brutalize and torture him. Superman is stabbed with the shard of kryptonite by Luthor and falls into the ocean and is left to drown, only to be rescued by Lois and Richard in a helicopter. After Lois removes the kryptonite from his back, Superman's able to regain strength from the sun and lifts the landmass after putting layers of earth between him and the kryptonite, while Luthor and Kitty escape in the helicopter. Unwilling to let millions die, Kitty tosses away the crystals that Lex stole from the Fortress of Solitude before their helicopter runs out of fuel, leaving them stranded on a desert island. Superman pushes the landmass with the crystals into space. Weakened by the kryptonite, he crashes back to Earth. So, I do think, again, to this movie's credit, while it is an overly darkly lit finale, I mean, I understand it's like storming and raining, but it's still, come on, not everything has to be gray. I do think it is pretty interesting. Like, I like that they put a focus on this movie on Superman saving people. I think it is a tremendous, really impressive feat of strength that is genuinely well framed, well shot of him lifting the landmass. I think it's probably the most impressive feat we've seen Superman do on film to this point, and the shots of him just saving people in the streets of Metropolis are much better looking, as well as just a very in tune callback to what was so great about Superman movies of the past. So I do want to give some credit there, because there is some things to be appreciated in this film for sure.
Yeah, I agree with Jake, because I'm definitely going to appreciate it more the further we get along DC movies. And then we get to the Snyder era. Let's not think about that right now.
Keep an open mind.
No,
I mean, because that's what I'm trying to go into, even like the ones that I've seen before, didn't like before. I'm like hoping, I still didn't like it, but Jason got me to open up a little bit to Howard the Duck before, so I feel like anything's possible.
Yeah, I went into this being hopeful.
Because not everyone, it's kind of funny to me that all four of us seem to overall, I mean, I don't want to get into final thoughts, we're not even on the plot, but this is a movie that's it has a following, people like it, it's hardly like it's this universally hated movie, so even though it did bomb at the box office, so it is kind of funny that 4 for 4 we all have very similar opinions on the matter.
I mean, the main thing that I felt when I was watching it was just, Brandon Routh's good, it's boring.
Yeah.
This movie is boring.
That's a good summary. That's a pretty good summary of the whole 2 hours.
There are some good performances in here. This movie's boring.
Mm-hmm.
It's it should be.
It does have some highlights, though. It does have some highlights, Superman saving people. But again, that's bare minimum of what's required in a Superman movie.
Let's think about that. Our highlight is Superman saving people in a fucking Superman movie.
Yeah, exactly. That's the bare minimum of what you expect from a Superman movie. Everything else about this movie in regards to the script is just boring, uninteresting, or really poorly executed.
Does anyone else feel too, kind of playing off what Matt said, that really reflects on how Superman himself is in this movie? Because maybe this feels like a kind of a weird complaint or a shallow one, but Superman feels a little too subdued to me. He's a little bit mopey. I just never really feel like he's someone who would inspire people. And the first movie had that whole line.
Yeah, he's a little Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
I think it's worse than that, honestly. I believe a man can fly from this movie. He just kind of seems he's bumming me out. I don't want to be in a room with the guy.
It's I definitely get that they were going for a more pensive and trying to be thought-provoking in some way, shape, or form by making him a bit more emotional and a bit more in him, like in his head, but like it doesn't. It, like I said, that's why it, like, there's a weird tonal shift going on here that makes it like there's a lot less hopefulness. There's a lot less of like that fun, hopeful, like happy tone that you usually see in the older movies, and then here it's like it's repressive. He feels sad. There's like this very pensive like feeling throughout that he just carries with him, and I don't want to see Superman with that. Like, it's worse than Man of Steel because it contrasts so heavily with what came before, and it doesn't fit with everything else.
It's basically like a foreshadowing moment because we thought we would, see Superman back to being Superman, but we were naive. We were so naive.
And it's one of those things that I think, like, obviously we've made the comparison now to the Cavill Snyder Superman, which we're not even close to getting to really yet in our watch through, but we will eventually. But I think at the very least, like, as polarizing as that interpretation was, your past performances and past interpretations are only there for personal preference. They don't necessarily impact the actual, like, you can't sit there and say, well, it doesn't really fit because it's a new version, even if you don't like it. Versus this one, you have to, because you have made the decision to set this as a continuation of those movies. It does not feel like this. I don't understand, especially because so much happened off screen, such as Jason being conceived and born, all of that, what happened between Clark and Lois, Clark's adventure to maybe find more Kryptonians only to be let down. So much happens off screen, as we've said time and time again, that it doesn't make sense why this character is shown this way, and ultimately it just feels less so like he's emotional and more so like he's emotionless. It's not that he's sad, it's that he's just bland, and I feel like it's like that guy who's sad, but when you ask him what's wrong, they just refuse to answer and say they're okay, and it's just kind of annoying. I don't actually feel like I get to process and join in these emotions like I'd want to from a character I care as much about as Superman.
That's just honestly so depressing. It is. It's honestly so depressing. Like, it's depressing to see, and it's depressing to watch. Just to see Superman just turn into a figurehead rather than an inspirational figure that he's meant to be. And it just goes back to, like what I said before. Like, this movie is trying to replicate what Christopher Reeves did, but you can't replicate Christopher Reeves, right? And so what they did was just make a poor imitation of it. That's just lacking in all of the soul and effort that went into making the original Superman so good. And a large part of that was Christopher Reeves' performance. And it's not Christopher Reeves. You gotta let the actor play to his strengths and not imitate what came in the past, because that's not going to succeed. It's really sad. It is really sad because you can't say there wasn't effort. Well, I'm actually questioning that as I'm saying, because is it even effort just trying to copy what happened in the past?
It's true. I mean, so I'm going to wrap the plot up because I don't know how much, unless y'all have something else, I don't know how much more there is to say without just repeating ourselves about how this feels both repetitive but also not at all like it's repeating somehow. So, at the hospital, after removing more kryptonite from Superman's body, the doctors learn they can't penetrate his skin with their surgical tools, and he remains in a coma. While visiting Superman, Lois whispers something into his ear and kisses him. Superman awakens and visits a sleeping Jason, to whom he recites the speech that his father Jor-El gave him while Jason sleeps. Obviously, what Lois told Clark/Superman is that he is the father. It's also not, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think it's really well done. They don't really address the dual identity thing in regards to Lois and Clark. She still seems to, I don't know why we can't just have her know that he's Superman. Sorry, that's a complete aside, but it's bothering me. And so he recites the Jor-El's speech to his son and flies off. Lois starts reading another article titled "Why the World Needs Superman," and Superman reassures her that he is now back to stay before he flies off into low orbit, where he gazes down at the world once again, paralleling the end of the Reeve movies. So, what are your guys' overall thoughts on, so let's just say, like, kind of broadly the storytelling of the movie, whether that's visuals or script writing? any of that.
Boring.
Well, there it is.
Yeah, just,
And I totally agree. Boring, poorly paced.
yeah, there's just not there's not a lot going for it.
No, like the scenes with Superman are really well done, but everything else is just lacking in soul. How should I say it? It's lacking in soul. It's lacking in competency. It's lacking in screenwriting. The cinematography is not that bad, I would say. Cinematography is solid. It's just like the definition of a below average movie. Like if Constantine is average, this is like below average. Like everything is like just leaves you wanting more, and you feel like this movie could have been so much better than it is, right? Like with Constantine, everything felt okay. I wasn't offended. In fact, I was having fun. And then when I finished watching the movie, I just felt neutral, right? And so my day could go on without any other problem. I can't say the same way about Superman Returns. Superman Returns just made me reminisce about better times that are now gone and I can never go back to.
Well, I also wouldn't say that this movie is particularly an abomination either.
Oh no, it's not an abomination. That's why I say it's like
It's
a
just-
below average. It's
Yeah.
like a 4 out of 4
It's
out
like-
of
that's
10.
that's a good way of putting it. Like it's just like a perfectly below average movie.
Yeah. Like, I can see the promise in it, and I can see that there's, like, genuine, like, in a lot of it. Like, I feel like the screenwriting lacks a little bit in the way that, like, a lot of these things aren't fully realized. A lot of the dialogue came across as a little weird to me, and, like, I really feel like that there are some character scenes in here that really could have worked and really helped it out, but it just doesn't feel like anything got, like, nothing really reached the potential that it was trying to go for and that it was trying to strive for. But I feel like there's, again, like I said, potential that it could have. It just really doesn't execute much of it well, and it's disappointing to see that. And, like, nothing else really helps either, because in between those character scenes that this movie tries to have, the movie is just boring. It's a lot of empty space, I guess, is the best way to really put it. And I don't even know, it's just things feel long, drawn out, and pensive, and like that can work for a movie, but just not this. It just doesn't work for it. It just, at least not in the way that they're trying to, anyways. And it just makes it, again, like, come across like Matt said, just very below average at times.
Yeah, one of the things Superman represents is, progress and moving forward, I think. And this movie doesn't have forward momentum, as you guys are kind of talking about here. I don't necessarily feel like I get anywhere in terms of there's this I think, like, when I kind of had a meltdown mid-plot about Lois still not knowing that Clark is Superman, that was one of the issues I had with the original Superman movies. And I think it continues here because it's just it's maybe the most egregious example of just no forward progress. And I think you have a situation where you could be showing these characters moving forward in their lives, but whereas maybe Lex as the villain is the only person who is still stuck behind and still not moving forward. But it feels like Lois is still hung up on this person that just abandoned the Earth for 5 years, even as she has a child. And while you could potentially use that as an example of like Superman showing up and that people's lives improving and showing that forward progress as a result of him and why he is important, that I don't really feel that's done. Towards the end, you kind of get this like illusion that him and Lois may get back together, but she's also still with Richard, which just feels like more stagnation. And as a result, like a movie that seems to want to have its why the world needs Superman, the article she's running at the end seems to be kind of what this movie wants to be about. Why, and in like a literal real world sense, why the world needs symbols, why the world needs hope, why the world needs to move forward. But I never actually feel like the movie conveys that. Other than the one example, maybe the fact that Lex continues to be Lex and Superman stops Lex again. That's the only, like, I just don't think there's enough in the movie and in the script to show, like, to prove that point of why the world needs Superman. And I think that almost is reflected in real world with the fact that that the Superman franchise has been, like, semi-rudderless and directionless since before this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
Well said.
Snap.
So you guys have, like, any thoughts on how these characters and these stories conclude? Because with Superman Returns, this is the last film that takes place in this continuity. There is, if anyone's curious, actually Brandon Routh does reprise his role as Superman in the CW Crisis on Infinite Earths event, which is better than you would think it is, and he's pretty good in there. But for all our intents and purposes, we are not returning to this continuity. So how do you guys feel about where we basically end things with this Superman and this Lois and this Lex, who I guess is just on an island?
It's anticlimactic and boring and not that great, as is most of this film, I feel.
I feel like, I feel like there was no way this was going to be a good book ending for it, and neither was the movie before it, so, like, we really didn't get any, there was no choice. You get bad or worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get bad or worse. You get dog shit or, sewer trash.
Mediocrity. I honestly will take
Yeah.
this over Superman 4.
I mean, that's a long
Yeah, I was gonna
man.
say, I mean,
Exactly, that's the thing.
I was gonna say, are you sure, man?
I'm just it's like, it's like getting slapped in the face instead of dropping a sledgehammer on your foot.
Yeah, it's like...
It's honestly, it's a lot less painful, but doesn't make it not painful. It still hurts.
Yeah, this
And
movie...
so I'm just left with an empty feeling that this is now the conclusion to a series that I love.
Yeah, this
It's
this movie
it's
is like...
how all the trilogies of my childhood end in disappointment.
Yeah,
And the only loser in that situation is me, because I was a fan in the first place.
loser...
Fair. A little dramatic, but fair. I mean, let's stop the bleeding then. Does anyone want to jump in with their final thoughts, their favorites, least favorites, and recommends?
This movie should have been called Superman Returns with a bunch of Z's, because it almost put me to fucking sleep. And with that, my least favorite part was the weird love triangle between Superman, Lois, and James Marsden, whose character's name was Rich White.
The strange.
Rich White.
This is the second time. This is the
Kind of a
second
funny
time
name.
we've seen James Martin get cucked in a comic book movie.
Yeah, that is kind of weird.
Horribly underused.
Yeah, and he, God, what a tragedy that is. What a treasure we have with James Marsden.
And
I had a
Justice
nickel
how
for
much
it.
waste potential he is in this movie.
Let's get the
I had
hashtag
a-
going. Justice for James.
Justice for James.
Don't worry, he
But-
got redemption
Justice for
with the
James?
Sonic movie.
That's a fact.
That's where
He murdered
Yeah,
that
at least he
shit.
got redemption there. If I had a nickel for every movie that or every comic book movie that James Marsden was cucked in, I'd have 2 nickels. It's weird that I have 2 and that it happened twice, but I'll take it because we got Sonic the Hedgehog.
Phineas and Ferb.
So yeah, that's my
It's
least
weird that
favorite part.
The first time he gets like an on-screen healthy relationship is with the Sonic the Hedgehog movie.
Yeah, but that was my least favorite part because it was just kind of weird because like his character was like a perfectly fine guy, and then Superman came back, and then Lois was just kind of like in love with him, and then their kid that he raised was actually Superman's kid. So that was kind of weird, and I don't know, I just thought it was an uncomfortable dynamic. My
It is
favorite
uncomfortable
part
dynamic.
was I thought Ray Palmer was really good as Superman. He did a really good job, and he was handsome.
Yes.
You really like calling him Ray Palmer.
'Cause I remember that quicker than I remember his real name of Brandon Routh.
Fair.
So, he's Ray Palmer to me. God damn it. And I think he'd appreciate it.
Okay, well, and I could probably guess on my own given the last, hour plus, but do you recommend this?
No, it was bad. Don't.
No.
There's no reason you should watch it.
No.
It's like there's worse
watch-
things to do, but you don't gotta.
There are worse things to do. You can just watch like the 5 minutes of Superman clips from this movie, and then you'll basically consume all the positivity that this movie emanates.
Basically.
You don't have to do anything else. That's literally it. And then, that means you got a better experience with this movie than us. Just don't get, just don't lie to yourself. Don't like fool yourself into thinking because these scenes were pretty decent that you should watch the movie. No. They're asking for 2 hours and 25 minutes of not necessarily pain, but like being in like a zone of like boredom. You know what I'm trying to say? Like when you're too bored, you just kind of daze. You're just in like a daze,
Yes.
That's what this movie is.
Yes.
This is true. I mean, for myself, I think honorable mention goes to any of the scenes where Superman gets to actually do Superman things. and save people and lift stuff. But unfortunately, I kind of hate to say it because the person playing him is allegedly an absolute monster, but Lex Luthor is my favorite part of this movie. It feels like the only thing that actually kind of works, and the only character who all of their scenes are actually pretty entertaining. And there's a lot of things vying for my least favorite, whether it is the mischaracterization of Lois, the general boredom, the general bland visuals, which I think speak to poor direction, the lack of identity, both in terms of what it is homaging and continuing, and its own uniqueness or lack thereof. But ultimately, I think my biggest issue is just having major developments happen off screen. The decision that comes from, you can paint it broadly as just a decision to make it a Legasequel, but to have Superman be gone for 5 years, and as such a strong premise as that is, and to never really feel the impact of the fact that he was gone for 5 years, both in the grand sense of how Metropolis and the world looks, and also in the sense of these characters' lives and their interpersonal relationships, that's really, really damning, I think, of a movie's quality if your lead's 5-year absence and continuity is just might as well not have happened. So, especially when your theme is why the world needs that character, why the world needs Superman. So, despite some glowing moments here and there, I don't recommend this. I would stop after Superman 2 and just quit while you're ahead.
Yep.
That way you get a good ending.
Exactly. It's a kind of weird ending, but it's good. My final thoughts? Well, I think my final thoughts have already been said throughout this entire podcast, but I'll reiterate my opinion. I think this movie is below average. I think it's like a 4 out of 10, and because of that, I would not recommend it. But I do like the Superman scenes. Just watch the highlights on YouTube, like how you watch sports highlights or episode highlights of your favorite show, right? Just do that. And no, I do not recommend it.
Yeah, my favorite thing I'd have to say are, those moments where Superman gets to be Superman, because Brandon really does, honestly, does a really good job.
Oh, we're on a first-name basis with Brandon now.
Sorry, Mr. Ray Palmer.
Dr. Ray Palmer.
But, I really appreciate him as Superman and working with what he's got. He does a really good job. Least favorite thing, as much as I would say there are other things, like this movie being boring is probably my least favorite thing, and God, how do you make it this boring? At the very least, Superman 4 was funny to me a little bit. This just was boring. It just, in the end, I came out of it and I've forgotten everything. It's a forgettable movie. It's the worst part of it. No, I don't recommend it, and I don't think I will ever recommend it, but that's okay, because there's some good reasons not to see this movie.
We do recommend is that you follow ALOVFX, as he provided our beautiful, wonderful artwork for the podcast, and that you follow Jason's music.
Yes, my music. I make music. I made the intro-outro music for this. The Upsides PA on Instagram. The _Upsides PA on Twitter. Even though my personal account is banned on Twitter right now. Fuck Elon Musk. And the Upsides on SoundCloud.
And also, one final recommendation is to follow Culture Illiterate on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to Culture Illiterate Podcast on YouTube. Follow us at illiterate_pod on Twitter, Instagram, any socials that we have. That's the @ Reach us at cultureilliteratepod@gmail.com with questions and comments. And next episode, I don't know why I said episode like
Episode.
Next episode, we're going to swing on over back to the Marvel side of things, specifically the Sony Marvel side of things, with a movie featuring the cinematic debut of one of Marvel's premier anti-heroes. That's right. We're getting caged with Ghost Rider.
Let's go.
Oh, God.